Hi everyone, this is Dr. Angela Cotellessa. I'm here with Michael Araki. I originally met Michael through Robert Root Bernstein, who we consider really the forefather of polymath studies. He's at Michigan State University. Actually, when I originally finished my doctoral dissertation on the lived experiences of modern day polymaths, the first thing I did, literally the next minute, was email it to Dr. Root Bernstein, and he responded very quickly and was very gracious to even respond to me, and he let me know Michael had done his thesis, master's thesis on polymaths as well. So that's how I know Michael. We're both very passionate about the field, and so today I'm going to ask you some questions about polymathy and your experience in the field.
Thank you, Angela. In fact, that was such a fortunate sequence of events. I started working on polymathy in my master's, as you said, and then I did a similar thing as you did. Oh, I need to email Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein, who have created the subfield of polymathy studies within the creativity and psychology research. And well, I was so happy I could be with them last year in 2018 at the SOU Creativity Conference. And at that time, I think he had already mentioned your work before. And then just after the conference ended last year, we started to get in touch and then to start this new endeavor with the Polymath's Place. And of course, this year we had those two amazing panels with them, and the first with Simonton and Irina Trofimova as well in Southern Oregon University for the Creativity Conference. And now in APA again, we just have another amazing panel with Robert and Michelle, and with such a good reaction and enthusiasm from the public. So thank you very much. And well, I'll be super glad to answer the questions. And okay, let's go.
Great. So my first question is, how did you discover polymathy?
Yeah, it was in 2011. I had a group of friends, and we used to just go to one of my friends' house and chat and talk about things in general. We had similar interests, but somewhat different as well. And one of those days, this good friend of mine was talking to me about a book he was reading called Dragons of Eden. And in this book, Carl Sagan talked about the polymaths, those people who could be creative in multiple domains, who could integrate knowledge and generate new stuff at the intersection, or harnessing knowledge from whatever domain. They didn't think about, okay, I'm in domain X and this is domain Y, etc. And was fascinated with the construct. It resonated so much with me. And at that time, I was still an undergrad student. I started late, my last undergrad that I did finish. I did some other ones that I couldn't finish. But since that time, I saw it was a very interesting thing that existed, like that encapsulated so many things that were important to me in a single word. And then I wanted to study it further and further. And then I discovered that there were some people writing about that, by the way, the Root Bernstein. There were more people, James Kaufman, Ronald Beghetto, Zorana Ivchevich, Bharath Siriraman, and in the history and philology fields, we have Peter Burke, who studies, who writes very well about polymaths, and he's an expert on Renaissance studies. And other people, but not so many people doing research, more systematic, more robust work on polymathy. And so it's a pity. I don't understand why such an important, powerful idea is not being studied more. And then when I was in my master's, course, I decided that I would do it in the master's, regardless that nobody in the department knew what Polymath was about at that time. It was 2013 then, but I insisted, and I did my master's in 2014. I wrote that. It was very difficult to convince people, and even I got a low grade on the methodology course because I took so long to understand what I was doing, and that I was doing a theoretical work that I couldn't deliver what the course wanted for my master's. Anyway, that's just a note on how sometimes thinking or trying to be innovative can be, you can receive punishment for that for several reasons. Anyway, but then I finished that in 2014-15, and then never stopped again, and well, that's how I got connected into the world of polymathic studies.
Yeah, and all these years later, you're still passionate about it, which is great. Next question, what's your definition of what polymathy is?
Yeah, that's very tricky, in fact. That was one thing when I started studying, I felt it was missing a very precise definition of this phenomenon. And as we had different researchers from different literature strands or even different domains investigating the phenomenon, so we didn't have a consensus, we still don't, but it was difficult to find a precise definition. What I did was I tried to capture the essence of the phenomenon. Some people said the polymaths are just the geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, Goethe, and others. I didn't like this very much. Some people said, oh no, we have polymathic ways of thinking. By the way, that's Bharat Sivaraman. Some others said, oh, you have to be a master in 3 domains, or an expert, or excellent, or informed. So there were all those different ideas on what polymathy is. And my conclusion is that among all those different themes and ideas, what I could extract was 3 major components: breadth, depth, and integration. Well, breadth is the easiest one to understand. Of course, you can't be a polymath if you don't have range, if you don't have versatility, if you don't have comprehensiveness, breadth of your knowledge, of expertise, of experiences, of learnings. So that's very easy to understand that polymaths need breadth. But with breadth alone, and some people use the word generalism or the generalist, you might end up with the dilettante person, which is a person who, I say, flies around and bites a little bit of here. I'm not saying it's not bad, it's bad or it's not appropriate, but it's different from the polymath. A polymath really has many projects, but the polymath delves into the projects until a level that the person gets some sense of what's going on, understands the principles, and even gets into a little bit of how those people in the field, the specialists, think. So they behave like specialists while they are there. Some of them have this imposter syndrome, as you yourself discovered, but I think polymaths, when they are discovering new fields, they really try to live that experience of what is going on, of what are the facts, the methods, the heuristics, the way of thinking in that domain. All right, so it has to do with depth, profoundness. So inquiry, not just a little taste or okay, I did that. Yeah, okay, that's good. That's an experience, but it shouldn't be translated to polymathy. Okay, and that's more or less easy to defend as well. But what many people miss is how the integration plays a super important part on polymathy. And integration has to do with, first, people who are not polymaths, they tend to take their learnings and just apply them to a narrow context. For example, we have schoolhouse giftedness. So the person who has book learning and knows, for example, all the equations in a physics subject. And Robert has this very nice example of a guy who was like that, knew all the equations. If you gave him any problem that was in the book, he could solve. But he failed to apply a very easy concept of torque, for example, to a very easy problem, which was opening a door. And then what's going on there? It's that non-polymathic people, they tend to take what they learn and just use in that context. And what polymaths often do is what I call trans-contextualism. So they can go to a superordinate level that they try to transcend, they try to see if those things they are learning could make sense in other contexts. That's one thing. The other thing is about how polymathic people can integrate their multiple interests in their life. All right, every polymath has multiple interests. That's a necessity to be a polymath. That's an antecedent. But the successful polymaths, they do it in a more synergistic way. So they, even though they are sometimes in a position that they have more or less conflicting interests, they can find a way to integrate, or they can find a way to arrive at synergies among those different interests as a network. So sometimes we start an endeavor and we never know, because most endeavors don't depend only on us, depend on society, depend on colleagues, depend on gatekeepers, and sometimes those other factors and variables are capricious. You don't know what is going to happen. So many of these polymaths, they have different endeavors, and depending on the feedback of the world, they cycle. Nabokov was a great example. Vladimir Nabokov, the writer of Lolita. So he taught to get money, he wrote, and he had this not so much a vocation, he had another vocation. He was a professional entomologist. So he studied butterflies and moths in a way to systematize them to arrive at better classifications. And some observers argue that having those different interests and endeavor helped him, by the way, write better characters, arrive at a more subtlety that is important not only in the fictional characters and as in his science work. So we have transcontextualism, we have synergy in networks of enterprise, and lastly, another strategy that polymaths use is to have integrative themes. For example, Herbert Simon, a very famous economist and psychologist, and he did a lot of things, but he integrated many pieces of his knowledge or learnings or experience into this common, let's say, vector, or this common stream of knowledge that he understood as decision making. So when you have a very powerful network that is already very well connected and strong, it's easier to plug into new branches. So he was looking around into the world and getting new learnings and seeing how those could connect with I already know, I already understand about what in his mind was decision making, because when he said that every endeavor that he entered was about decision making, that's a very broad conceptualization of decision making, by the way. Mm-hmm. But for him, it worked as a main, how can I say, main power source where he could connect more dots to arrive at a very large network. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a very good strategy, because what I see people doing is that when they learn new things, they are trying that through repetition. So they have a very weak stimulus, and they try to repeat, but they are not so prone as polymaths to make connections. Mm-hmm. But when you have a weak stimulus and pair it with a strong one, whatever you call it, for me, my integrative theme is polymathy itself. So when I go to talk about animal behavior, I can see connections with polymathy. When I go to talk about economics, I see connections, or whatever, physics. And those connections are much easier for me to remember and to become useful later. It was a very long explanation, but in short, it's breadth, depth, and integration.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Why does polymathy matter to you?
All right, it matters in many levels. And first, it matters personally. So polymathy can be, and in my view, is a philosophy of life. So we have, as Albert Camus says, a very short trip in this ephemeral island of existence. And if we analyze, the world is kind of absurd. So many institutions have advanced solutions or answers, definite answers for how you should live your life. So in the past, people subscribed to a religion, some people subscribe to whatever. And if you think about it, it's kind of arbitrary, these answers. And that's what the philosophers, the existentialists, say. Whatever you believe this or not, we have this fact that we're gonna die, and we live this ephemeral island of existence. So the question is, what to do with that? So what it would mean to live a good life given we have this. So what's our gift as humans? This thing here, especially our prefrontal cortex, which has the ability to reflect into the world, to not only to be a sensory machine of input and output, but have something in the middle. So I receive a lot of information in the world, and what do I make of it? And how can I transform it into novel and nice things? So I think our job here, our mission is to gather as much substance as possible and engage in a very lived, a very animated interplay with our society, because to make good new things that matter, we need to connect with the resources that are there. For example, if I want to make music, I will not invent each note or each chord from scratch. I will be standing on the shoulders of great people in the past, but I will have to, how can I say, internalize that and make a transformation here that is unique. And when I give birth to that, I expect that some other people will also appreciate that it can also feed them. So for me, polymathy is about feeding yourself with the marvelous things from nature and from society, from other humans, and then giving back in the form of novel and adaptive or effective, what do you want to say, beautiful things in the world. So it matters for the person for this reason, and of course you can derive from that if a person is engaged in this cycle, in this interplay, this person will also generate things that matter to society. Because I have this distinction of passive polymathy and creative polymathy. A passive polymath is only a consumer of things, of knowledge. And of course it's very good to know, to get access to books, to the knowledge that people arrive that can explain how nature, how people work. That feels good, especially polymaths feel good when they learn, right? But I think without this other part, which is the creative part, I feel it's missing something, it's lacking. And this is all about contributions. They don't need to be what researchers call big C contributions, like I have to be a Leonardo. No. And it's also the way that your contribution is appreciated by society is also idiosyncratic, capricious, like Mona Lisa was not appreciated before it was stolen, etc. So I think regardless, you have to engage yourself in this interplay and generate your stuff, to put your, how can I say, your personal touch into the world.
Yeah, that's great. Next question, what is your approach to the study of polymathy?
Yeah, so I think we are reaching an important moment in human inquiry. I wouldn't say only science, I would say human inquiry in general. In the past, it was the era of big ideas with the small data. So we have those great geniuses that came with models, with theories of how the world, the humans, our brain worked, but they didn't have so much data. There weren't so many labs to provide this data. And now we live in a world of big data, and I think people are more afraid now to put out more daring ideas, because they are going to be attacked from so many angles. So, for example, we are here, APA psychology is a field, but we have like, I don't know, 70 divisions, sub-divisions within psychology. And just in this room, probably there was a talk about polymathy, us, and then a talk about something completely different, perhaps animal behavior, in like the same domain. And then when you make large claims, the likelihood is that you're going to be attacked. But regardless, I think our next step is to integrate those big data, which means empirical work from many domains, subdomains, the theories that drive that empirical work and that are driven by the empirical work, because science is a cycle. You make theories, and then you make claims, you test them, and then you prove theories, and then groups of people are doing it in separate. And to understand polymathy, you must take polymathic approach. So it's a tremendous job. It's not a job for one person alone, but I think we should be more courageous in that. And I never concede on the rigor. We have to do it in a rigorous way. So the work and the workload of that is absurd. But now we have more means. People can communicate easier. So you don't need to write a letter and expect, will Einstein answer this letter? We have fast communication. So we must harness these novel tools and technology to make our minds more connected to solve problems like what is this phenomenon of polymathy, how it works. So one of the things I'm doing first is try to systematize. So we're talking about what? So what's the territory? And then that's one job. And then what kind of pieces of previous work are already relatable or can be plugged into what we are building now. And I think that that's the way. So I call my approach a biopsycho social approach, which looks crazy because of the comprehensiveness of that. But if I can propose that, is that because I can have help of people. So this connection and panels like that that we have, bringing people from different fields, that's very important. And people should lose their fear of learning something new, of looking full, especially when you are a PhD, you feel like, or a professor, you feel like you have to know the answers. You are afraid of entering in a new subfield, not new field, subfield, that may make you look like an amateur, a novice, a beginner. And I think that's the only way. If you keep doing the same things that you were doing, of course, you're gonna get the same results. And we need more comprehensive explanations. That's my approach.
Very good. All right, my last question is, what do you wish most for the future of the field of polymath studies?
Yeah. Well, when I started delving into polymath studies, the first thing I noticed was the scarcity of material. So first wish, more people studying polymathy with rigor, systematization. People studying that with a love of good inquiry, because you can study that in a lazy way. In fact, it happens, but I would like people to study it with passion and rigor. And one thing that is very, very important is to change the way organizations think about innovation, about people who are polymathic. And don't take me wrong, there is a role for polymaths and specialists, but as you yourself discovered in your work, many people are noticing that this discrimination that exists now, polymaths, as you said, are being discriminated against, is leading to a great loss to people, like being fuller about what they can do, and a loss to society, because you're losing potential contributions because we are afraid to take polymaths. We're afraid to recruit them. We are not prepared to deal with them because they might be troublemakers, because they are investigating things in different angles. They are asking questions, and depending on the organization, I would say most organizations, they don't like that, or at least many leaders that we have seen in organizations. And then suddenly they go out of business. Why? Because you have to ask the hard questions, and polymathic people tend to do that more often, because when you are a specialist, you generally commit very early to a specific branch. So you have, let's go back to decision making by Herb Simon. So you have this thing called nodes of decision making, and then when you are too specialized, you generally commit to one node, and then sometimes the answer is to go back several nodes and look through a different angle. But if you are a specialist, you take this first node for granted. So you only work within this branch. And polymathic people, they have experience with different branches, so they can cast this angle. But it's very not comfortable for the people who are in those angles. And it's like they are carrying this rock in this way, and then you come with, why have you been doing that for? There is this story for like this for years, and then the person comes with a new solution and says, oh, if I apply the solution, everything I have done in the past will be meaningless. So we have to work with our emotions collectively and as organizations, as institutions, to erect new ways to think about what people can bring to organizations, into culture in general. And
All right.
this is it.
Well, thank you for a great interview.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much.